It reduces the tax burden on the wealthy, and it redistributes the tax burden down. At a very time when this country is having all sorts of questions about income inequality, along he comes along and says, let's increase income inequality in the country. That is not going to fly. That's why I think he peaked tonight. The more people look at this, they're going to say,
you're already speaking about him in the past tense.
I think he peaked.
I'm willing to keep watching him. I don't think that's the case.
And he said he's. I just talked. You know, he says he's hiring staff.
Yeah, he needs a lot.
He needs some policy staff, honestly.
Yeah, that's true.
I think the scrutiny the plan faces will hurt him in the long run. Did he peak tonight? I don't think we can answer that question yet, because here's what we don't know. He has a little bit of Ross Perot. He has the Tea Party favor. And some of those people, if we say it's bad, they will think it's good. If another politician says it's bad, they will think it's good. There is this attitude of don't trust the establishment, don't trust the politicians, as Sarah Palin would say, we in the lamestream media. And so with some people that everyone's against it will help him. In the long run, can he last in a two-way race?
Dana, do you think he peaked tonight?
No, I don't think that he's peaked yet. I think that the fervor surrounding Herman Cain is kind of just getting started. He's one of the most aggressive, in fact, he is the most aggressive primary candidate. He's out front on so many issues, and he says things that I think other candidates are warned not to say. And it works in Herman Cain's favor. He's just very blunt. He's very forthright. And so that does well for him too. But I do agree with what's been said. He needs to be a little bit more, he needs to speak a little bit better about this 999 plan, because there's so many questions. It's so complex, and it seems like there's always another story behind it. Just that it took 10 minutes of the debate just to get into the meat and potatoes of it tonight. So it's very difficult to answer, and he's got to get better at that. But I don't think he's peaked yet.
There wasn't meat and potatoes. It was apples and oranges. We're going to we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to show you what they had to say about the Occupy Wall Street movement, immigration, faith, a lot more ahead. Stay with us.
You got to go now?
You stood here in front of the American people and did not tell the truth that you had illegals working on your property, and the newspaper came to you and brought it to your attention, and you still, a year later, had those individuals working for you.
We hired a lawn company to mow our lawn, and they had illegal immigrants that were working there. And when that was pointed out to us, we let them go. And we went to them and said, you have a problem with allowing someone to finish speaking. And I suggest that if you want to become president of the United States, you got to let both people speak.
Rick Perry all but accusing Mitt Romney of lying to the public there. Dana Lash, you've been critical of Mitt Romney in the past. What do you think of how he did tonight?
I actually thought this was Mitt Romney's worst debate, because Romney's a very good debater. He has some suave rhetorical skills. But tonight he did some negative campaigning. He was negative tonight. He's tainted now. He came across as this do-gooder campaigner guy who didn't really have anything bad to say. He would condescend in a polite way. But this time he got really dirty and he started slinging mud. That's going to hurt him, because he came across as rude and condescending. And I don't think people identify with that. That works against a candidate every time. So this was his worst debate.
Ari, did you see that in Mitt Romney tonight?
No, I thought he stood his ground, punched back, and that's what debates are all about. And I think people are going to kind of forget this. This was just a feisty moment in a long debate, one of many debates, and there are many more to come. So, no, I think Romney stays on top.
You know, he was attacked, and he fought back. The only chord that he struck that kind of didn't sit with me was when, in a very complicated discussion over immigration and offense and how to do it, he said, it's not that difficult. It's easy. It's not hard to do that. And you listen to that and you think, you know what? It is difficult, or it would be done.
I want to just show a little bit about what some of the candidates had to say about the Occupy Wall Street movement. Let's watch. Herman Cain, I got to ask you, you said, quote, 2 weeks ago, you said, don't blame Wall Street, don't blame the big banks. If you don't have a job and you're not rich, blame yourself. That was 2 weeks ago. The movement has grown. Do you still say that?
Yes, I do still say that. And here's why. I still stand by my statement, and here's why. They might be frustrated with Wall Street and the bankers, but they're directing their anger at the wrong place. Wall Street didn't put in failed economic policies. Wall Street didn't spend $1 trillion that didn't do any good. Wall Street isn't going around the country trying to sell another $450 billion. They ought to be over in front of the White House taking out their frustration.
sort of teed it up for him there. I didn't really mean to, but he clearly just knocked that one out of the park. I mean, and it was obviously, at least for this audience in this hall, that played very well.
He's still fascinating. He's the fascinating outsider with a business credential. And this is a great year to be that. I still wish he was a governor that he had, much as an outsider, had some governing experience. And he's got to learn to be more temperate in some of the things he says, the electrification of the fence, etc. He's got to get presidential if he really wants to try to win.
It was interesting, actually. There was a question in the hall from a Latino voter, registered Republican. He actually changed the question he was going to ask. The question he had planned to ask was that in his community, he was going to say that in his community, Republican is sometimes a dirty word. And what can the people on this stage do to change that? He kind of backed away from that actually in the hall, but in advance, that's what he had written down as the question he wanted to ask. How did you think, Donna, that they responded to the question that was asked about how Republicans can reach out to Latinos?
Well, I thought they were flat-footed, quite frankly. I thought that after coming off as being real strident on immigration and not talking about a comprehensive solution in solving the problem, many of them didn't know what to say or how to appeal to the fastest-growing minority in this country, the minority community in this country. And I know from experience winning states like Nevada, Colorado, Florida, New Mexico, and many others, you really need to Latino vote. That's something that George W. Bush did in 2000. And that's something that President Obama did in 2008. And if one of these candidates wish to be president of the United States, they will have to reach out to the Latino community.
How do you think the Occupy Wall Street movement, does it play a role in this upcoming election? I mean, because Democrats seem kind of conflicted about whether to embrace it, or, you know, we've heard Nancy Pelosi saying that she understands the anger of it. President Obama saying, you know, they understands the frustration of it.
And tonight, Ron Paul said he understands the anger and the frustration of it. And I think that people don't really know how to react to it because they don't know how it's going to play out. What I think is true is that Wall Street will be an issue one way or another. You heard tonight on this stage, the bailout of Wall Street is going to be an issue among Republicans, and there were charges about whether Rick Perry had in fact supported the bailout when he said he didn't. And so, you know, that Wall Street itself and the question of the bailout and why did Wall Street do well and why is Wall Street coming out of this and middle America is not, is going to be a central question in this campaign.
I think a lot depends, Anderson, about Occupy movement, about what happens after the first frost. Do they stay out there in the parks? Right. Do the demonstrations continue to grow, or do they begin to fade? If they fade, the Occupy movement's not going to be an issue in the campaign, but they have put on the table, for one of the first times I can remember, this question about the yawning gap between the wealthy and everybody else. And that is an issue Republicans have shied away from. And I think they're going to have to come to grips with it. President Obama is clearly moving to the left on this. He's clearly going to make that part of his campaign strategy. And the Republicans are going to have to, I believe, come to grips with that. And frankly, if you don't show much sympathy for people at the bottom, and some of these weren't, there was a mix up there tonight about, Ron Paul was the one who was showing sympathy. Right. If they don't have much sympathy for that, they're going to have some trouble.
Well, you do see a lot of anti-Fed signs in the Occupy Wall Street, or some at least.
It is an anti-establishment protest movement right now. Anti-greed, anti-big bank, sometimes anti-Washington, because they believe Washington is part of the problem, or at least not listening to their concerns. But President Obama today told ABC's Jake Tapper he views it as very much like the Tea Party movement. We don't know that yet. It's an effective protest movement right now. Will they make the transition to an effective political movement? The Tea Party did that. The Tea Party did that and made a huge impact on the 2010 elections and is influencing all these candidates up here tonight because they realize the juice it still has in the Republican Party. The Occupy Wall Street movement, as important as it is, this is not to bring them down in any way. We haven't seen the persistence that we saw in the Tea Party movement. The Tea Party targeted specific candidates, including Republican incumbents, and they proved political punch. We don't know that about Occupy Wall Street yet.
I'll predict to you, I don't think the issue will be what happens after the first frost. I think they'll get cold and they won't sleep in parks anymore. We'll see. The issue will be after the first flowers of spring. I think that's when this thing gets big. No. I think next summer, this Occupy Wall Street movement is going to get very big, take a role prominently at both parties' conventions, and we're going to hear a lot. I also think it's going to boomerang in the center of this country, and it's going to largely hurt those who try to associate too closely, because right now it looks too much like a fringe group. If they had more of a focus on poverty and alleviating difficulties between rich and poor, and had policies to affect it, I think they would have much more credibility among independents in the center. I think right now they're going to turn off a lot of the center and independents.
Dana, I heard you scoffing when it was compared to the early days of the Tea Party.
There's a couple of things. There's a couple of things that I have to say. I disagree with the notion that this is anti-greed. Any movement that protests for a living wage, regardless of whether or not you're employed, is the epitome of greed. Number one. Number two, there's no responsibility given to Washington at all whatsoever. This current administration is propped up by Wall Street. This is the Wall Street president. This president has received more from Goldman Sachs and the very entities that these protesters are out there protesting than any other president. Three, I think the grassroots element in this has been hijacked already. One of the things that the Tea Party had to deal with two fronts. The Tea Party fought against Republican establishment. I was very involved in New York 23. Newt Gingrich and I went round and round over Didi Scozafava. The establishment was not a fan of me, still is not a fan of me. And we also have to fight against progressives and progressive agenda. Where you have the Occupy Wall Street, they have the endorsement of the president. They have the blessing of Nancy Pelosi. They're also endorsed by the Nazi Party of the United States. They're also endorsed by communists. These are things that we did not see with the Tea Party movement. So there's another difference. I could go on and on and on, but those are the three major differences that I see between both of these movements.
I see them as a very organic, down-home movement. They're seeking to educate the American people about the inequality in wages. There are students who feel as though they've played by the rules, they've graduated from schools, and they can't find jobs. They're homeowners who are underwater and cannot afford their mortgages. They're ordinary Americans, like Tea Party Americans, who are angry about the status quo. And before we start demonizing them and marginalizing them, we should listen to them. That's something that the Tea Party wanted Washington to do. I think we should also listen to those who are occupying cities across the country.
We got to take a quick break. Coming up, who came out looking the most presidential tonight? We'll break it down when we continue. We'll be right back. Tonight, the Western Republican presidential debate, each of the candidates made their case why they should be a nominee. Some made it clear they are looking ahead to the general election, and they weren't shy when it came to attacking their opponents. Here's another moment when things got especially heated between Rick Perry and Mitt Romney.
If you want to know how someone's going to act in the future, look how they act in the past. I mean, so, Mitt, while you were the governor of Massachusetts in that period of time, you were 47th in the nation in job creation. During that same period of time, we created 20 times more jobs. What we need is someone who will draw a bright contrast between themselves and President Obama. And let me tell you one thing, I will draw that bright contrast.
I got to give you 30 seconds, Governor Romney.
Yeah, with regards to track record, in the past, Governor, you were the chairman of Al Gore's campaign. All right, and there was a fellow Texan named George Bush running. So if we're looking at the past, I think we know where you were.
Donna Brazile, I saw you chuckling at that.
I was with Dick Gephardt that year, but I remember Rick Perry fondly. And he's a tough customer. I thought Rick Perry gave a very robust performance tonight. He came clearly more energized. He was ready to take on Mitt Romney. He was ready to take on Herman Cain. I don't know if this will help his stand in the poll, but with $15 million in the bank, he can put together an organization in those early states.
I saw a tweet, I think, from Eric Erickson earlier saying, where's this Rick Perry been before? Like, that he was actually, did it seem, do you think he's just learned from the past debates? Because the last debate, he seemed almost to be kind of just trying to get through it.
The last debate, remember, they were all seated at a table. And that is a harder environment in which to throw punches, verbal punches at somebody else. I don't know why, but it is. When you're standing, it's a little easier. He needed to do it. He's got to do some more of it if he wants to be the nominee.
If he'd been as good in these other debates as he was tonight, this would be a two-man race. And the fact was he had weak debate performances. I think he came back tonight. He was much better briefed. He hit hard. It did get personal. But I think he lifted himself tonight because as I made clear, I think Herman Cain may not have lifted, maybe have peaked.
I think the attack on immigration, though, against Mitt Romney for knowingly hiring illegal immigrants was old and kind of small. when you're
I
talking
remember that
about
from 5 years
right,
ago.
and when you're talking about immigration policy. So,
however, Romney gave what many Republicans are already calling a Clinton-esque answer, saying that I'm running for office. I found out they were illegal. Well, wait a minute. How about it was wrong to have illegals working on your lawn? So you only did something about it because you're running for office?
That was not a good answer.